spiritual beliefs which formed the foundation of African community life had to be drained of their power and effectively destroyed. What the missionaries had come to do was to convince Africans that they must renounce their beliefs, forget their ancestors, and discard the very fabric of their culture. This missionary film, made as recently as the 1960s, makes the point very clearly.
As these women, whose lives have been spent in the dark shadow of fear, listen to the radiant young girls, they wonder at their joy and confidence. They remember the offerings they've so often made to the Juju themselves, the sacrifices which have been of no use. I will tell you of a God who does not require our sacrifice. He made sacrifice for us. And she shows to these fear-ridden people the symbol of God's love. Sometimes the people seek out the missionary later. We have lost our faith in these Jujus, they say. We want to destroy them and begin a new life. Some rejoice. Some wonder what will become of them now. Finally comes the great day when they gather for the baptism service. Students from the training college, girls from the primary school, men and women, one by one they go down into the waters of baptism so that they might be renewed in Christ.
A skeptic might find it hard to see why one form of spiritual renewal should be so superior to another. But to these missionaries, this was the indispensable climax to their endeavors. This is a Methodist school called Wadilav in modern Zimbabwe. It's an important day because the Minister of Information, Mr. Nathan Chamorera, himself an old boy of the school, is making a visit. The event brings into focus some of the underlying currents and contradictions of recent history. Mr. Chamorera speaks for a government with radical ideas which may well find itself at odds with religious conservatism. Yet he was educated here and brought up in the religion of white colonial settlers whose contempt for African humanity generally outweighed their Christian commitment to the brotherhood of man. It's one of the ironies of Christianity in Africa that, although it may have preceded colonial occupation, it can't now escape from the fact that it became deeply involved with the system. The foreign rulers may have departed, yet the tunes live on.
Unechimiro chake chisingatonwe nezvimwe zvinhu chisina mumwe
Nowadays the sermon is no longer in English. This clergyman is speaking Shona, the language of most of the children at Wadi Love. And he clearly feels no need to put so much emphasis on sin and guilt. How far is the accusation true that missionary teaching was really part of colonial teaching?
Well, the whole missionary enterprise here was an integral part of colonization. The missionaries came to this country with the colonizers from South Africa, and one particular missionary, Reverend Jackson, assisted in interpreting the deceptive Rad concession to King Lubengula at the time of colonization, and this relationship between the administrators, the soldiers and the miners, the gun and the Bible, so to speak, continued throughout the colonial period. But however, the missionary enterprise did also assist in the sharpening of contradictions within colonial society. On the one hand, the missionaries were preaching the equality of man, and yet they themselves were practicing discrimination in a deeply racially divided colonial society.
So they were part of the racist setup.
They were part of the racist setup. On the other hand, they were providing education in order to get literate workers to work in the factories and in the mines and farms of the colonizer.
In honor of the minister's visit, the school has laid on a display of gymnastics. Most early missionaries tried to destroy the dancing arts and rhythms of Africa, saying that these were lascivious and evil. Yet African Christianity has managed to survive that effort at repression. And children at mission schools like this can have the fun of combining the new with the old.
1, 2, 3, 4, Kuti, viva, Kuti, viva. 1, 2, 3, 4, Kuti, viva, Kuti, viva. 1, 2, 3, 4, Kuti, viva.
In another part of the school grounds, quite suddenly, old Africa was being revived. Here was a schoolgirl in the midst of a Christian mission reenacting the role of a spirit medium as she goes into her trance. Helped by friends, she portrays an ancient ritual of Shona belief. This, many people still believe, is the method used by their ancestors to pass messages to the living. These girls were playing out a drama of their own history, one that many of them will have witnessed in their family backgrounds. Across the years of the colonial intrusion, it's a kind of psychological reconciliation between the present and the past. How does one summarize the effect of the missionary effort in terms of Africans coming to terms, coming to grips with the realities of the world?
Well, on the one hand, they were, anxious and did, take very drastic steps to destroy the culture of the African people. This was implicit in the teaching of Christianity itself. In the same context, it produced the contradictions which led to the downfall of colonialism by educating people, bringing them to an institution like this where we were able to meet students from different parts of the country, and one was given a national perspective at an institution like this. And it was then possible when one left here to go and organize at a national level. So many of the national leaders of this country today were educated at mission schools. 9 out of every 10 educated blacks were educated at mission schools. Comrade Robert Mugabe, the first prime minister of an independent Zimbabwe, was brought up, trained and educated at Kutama, a Roman Catholic mission school. And many of the leaders in the present Zimbabwe government were educated at various mission schools throughout the country. So it did produce its own contradictions, and it sharpened the contradictions in colonial society.
Like a lot of other things in history, it had an unforeseen outcome.
Yes, yes, it had.
When you get an old boy coming to your school, certainly some of you should feel inspired by the amount of contribution